Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mickelson, your host, speaking at you from June 15th, Sunday, June 15th, 2025, in the space and time continuum. I want to go back in time a little bit to 2023, when the Minnesota legislature legendarily passed probably the most sweeping legislation in the history of Minnesota, certainly, possibly the country, in one legislative session. Paid family and medical leave, which I was working on with different coalitions for years and years, and it got passed in the legislative session in early 2023 here in Minnesota. Free lunch and breakfast for children in school. You've heard about these things. This was a big part of what made Tim Walz become the candidate for vice president along with Kamala Harris. Of course, he did win that election, but he still, for some reason, is the governor of Minnesota. He has called the Speaker of the House during that session the most consequential Speaker of the House in the history of Minnesota. I agree with him. Her name is Melissa Hortman. She was a good friend of mine and his, and so many of us here in Minnesota. I want to go back further in time now to 2012, when a very scared and nervous new candidate was running in an almost at that time, pretty impossible district to run in as a Democrat. I was this candidate running out here to the west of Minneapolis, about 25 miles west of Minneapolis, in a very, very red house district. And I was very nervous. It's scary to run for office. And it was even less known about then. It's been talked about so much more since then, but you feel like, oh, what are people going to find out about me? Or I got to what? I got to raise money. I got to talk to people and ask them to give me money. So I very scared, was at my very first fundraiser. And Melissa Hortman showed up. I think it was a Tuesday evening might have been a Monday evening at, something like 6:00 in the evening. And she drove probably 20 miles from around where she lives to come and be at my fundraiser to support me and speak at my fundraiser. She was a rising star pretty much in the DFL party at the time. She was a Minnesota House member who was just absolutely kicking ass. I couldn't believe she was there. I had spoken to her a couple times on the phone, and I met her a couple times in person, but for her to be at my fundraiser absolutely blew my mind. And she was so kind and gracious and funny and just such a great person. This is somebody who made 1/10 of the amount of money that she could have made had she stayed in the private world, in the, what do they call it? The public sector, whatever. She could have made 10 times more money. But no, she was first elected on her third try. Talk about perseverance, in 2004. So she's spent basically half her life in the legislature as a public servant. She's a public servant. She changed Minnesota so immensely for the good even just in that one session. She, of course, rose to be Speaker of the House eventually. So let's stay back in time in 2012, after I ran and got my ass handed to me. But everyone still thought I did a good job because of how impossible it was. The percentage numbers, you've heard me say this, I brought them up quite a bit. So people were, I don't know, they were kind of celebrating that I ran because they were having trouble getting candidates at all in this district. But still, I got my ass handed to me. And around the holiday time, I got a card from Melissa Hortman with a picture of her and her family. She totally filled the card up inside and all across the backside. It's like she couldn't stop writing, and it was just nothing but graciousness. And again, my jaw dropped. I'm like, I couldn't believe that she took the time to write to me, to tell me how important it was to her that I ran and how much she admired me for running. It was just so kind and gracious. And again, she just always took the time to be your friend over and above everything else. And she was attacked constantly with the whole vile Republican, especially when the Tea Party started and all of that. And then when she was the leader, the leader in the House, before she became the Speaker and then became the Speaker, she was so viciously attacked so constantly. Maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years, I would be just doing my day in my shop with my small business, and I would get a call, and it would be Melissa Hortman, and I would answer and say, "Hey, Melissa, how you doing?" And she would say, "Todd?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And she would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I meant to dial somebody else. I have somebody else in my phone." I don't know, their name was Miller or something, and it was, M-I, like some of the same spelling as my name. And she would start to, tell her phone who she wants to call, and it would bring up me, and she would push the call button without looking. And she would apologize and say, "I meant to call somebody else. I'm sorry." And I said, "Oh, well, it's good to hear from you anyway." And she would take the time to talk to me and say, "Well, how have you been?" And we would talk for a few minutes in the middle of her busy day when she's trying to call somebody else for something, probably having pretty important to do with legislation in Minnesota. She worked closely with Kelly Morrison, who, if you've listened to the show, Kelly Morrison is another incredible rising star who I originally talked into running for the state house in late 2017. And so in early 2018, Kelly was running, and now she was the first-time candidate. And she was registering to be the candidate at the state house in St. Paul, Minnesota. And of course, this is when Melissa was not yet the Speaker, but she was the leader of the Democratic Party in the House, the minority leader. And she came up to me and said, "I want Kelly to speak. Will she speak?" And Kelly was scared in those days. It was brand new. She hadn't spoken really much at all, to an audience. She's a very kind of shy, private person. She's, and not shy, but humble. And anyway, I thought to myself, "Oh, Kelly's not going to want to do this, but I'm going to make her do it because Melissa Hortman asked me to get her to do it." Melissa Hortman immediately recognized the force of Kelly Morrison, and Kelly went on to prove that to be true with Melissa Hortman, always being so supportive. There was another event before that election, and of course, Kelly was running in a place where there had never, ever been a DFL representative. Just like me, it wasn't as impossible as my district, but nobody thought she was going to win except me. And then I found out Melissa Hortman. There was an event where she invited me to for past candidate appreciation. I got invited as a past candidate, even though I hadn't ran now for 4 years. And Melissa invited me to that. And then she called me over and said, hey, Todd, this is a statistics guy. I can't remember his name or anything, but he was a statistics guy. She wanted to make this guy aware of Kelly Morrison. And she said, Todd, at that time I was kind of still running her campaign. A few of us were running her campaign, but I was sort of recognized as, at least by Melissa, still as sort of being her campaign manager. And she said, this candidate, Kelly Morrison, really can win this district. And the statistics guy was very doubtful and said, well, we'll have to see how well she does. But statistics show that she's not going to win. And I said, she is going to win. And Melissa complimented my confidence. And she was funny. One time I ran into her. My wife and I were going out to eat for my wife's birthday, which is December 2nd. So it was cold out. And I was trying to make one of the new things in Minneapolis at the time, the electronic parking things where you put your card in and and all this stuff. And nobody could figure them out. And I'm trying to figure it out. And all of a sudden, there on the sidewalk, Melissa Hortman is standing next to me by chance. And it was kind of unbelievable. And she was like, hey, and she didn't even seem surprised to see me. And I'm like, Melissa? And she said, yeah, we're eating here in here at the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, we're eating over there at the blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, have you figured this out? And I'm like, I can't figure this out. And so the two of us had to figure out how to make the parking meter work together. She was such a great, kind person who dedicated her life to trying to make life better for other people. Working families was her focus, was always trying to help the people who couldn't afford things. She was always working for the underprivileged and the regular people, and she did so much for them. And the final thing she had to do was to get this budget passed in Minnesota. She had to make a vote that was totally against her own moral standards. And even on being interviewed on TV, tears came to her eyes because it hurt her so bad to make this particular vote. But it was, again, the Republicans in Minnesota holding the Democratic Party hostage, actually holding all of the people of Minnesota hostage. I interviewed Melissa 3 or 4 times on the radio back when I was on AM 950. I started to listen to one of the interviews yesterday, and I just couldn't. I couldn't listen to it. As you know, the night before, she was brutally murdered in her home along with her husband. Whatever did that to her is not a human being. I don't want to talk about that. But just so you know, in case you're unfamiliar about who I'm talking about, it's Melissa Hortman, who was targeted because of how good she was for people. My experience running for office and meeting so many great people who were doing the same. Kelly Morrison, Melissa Hortman is at the very top of the list for sacrificing her whole life. I mean, for trying to help other people, showing up at a candidate's fundraiser at 6:00 in the evening when she should be just being done with her day, a candidate who had no chance of winning. But she knew that this candidate was scared to death to have his first fundraiser, and she knew that she wanted to be there to support that candidate. She is one of the best people among us all. She didn't deserve this. The role that she has to play in this horrible mess is the most difficult. So I'm not sure what else to say, but I just really wanted to talk about her as a person. Because she was the best of the best. She was the best of us. And her accomplishments and her contributions to the state of Minnesota and the people of Minnesota will be remembered forever. She has been the most consequential Speaker of the House. There's never been a session like this, such a successful session for the people of Minnesota, and it was led by Melissa Hortman. I can't say any more about it. The law enforcement told Minnesotans not to go to the No Kings protests yesterday because of this incident that happened overnight, Friday night going into Saturday morning. Happened around 3:30 in the morning. The organizers even announced that they were canceling, but it did not hold Minnesota back. As a matter of fact, I think even more people showed up. It was chilly and rainy, and it didn't stop people, and people changed a lot of their signs to read things like, "This is for our beloved Melissa." In Minnesota, the No Kings protest turned into a whole nother thing, and estimates are 80,000 people just at the Capitol in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm so sorry that I'm so weepy. I was going to try and be my professional radio announcer guy. This is so tragic, but then the amount of love coming out in support of Melissa Hortman is so beautiful. And I thank all the people who were at the protests, not only against Donald Trump, but here in Minnesota, to show that you cannot scare us. Melissa Hortman would have never wanted us to back down. She was tough. That's why she was so powerful. She was a skilled negotiator and politician. She ran the House. It was amazing to witness. The interviews I did of her, I was going to play one of them as my show, but they're from the past. They're old news. I think it would be beautiful to hear her voice talking in the way that she did on those interviews, laughing yet showing how tough she is. Maybe I have them up on my website. They've been there since I did them a couple years ago. And we had a lot of fun on those interviews together. And again, all I had to do was ask, "Hey, Melissa, could I interview you on the radio?" And she would say, "What time? I'll call in." And somehow she found the time to do it. And they turned out really good, and you do get a good idea of her work. So maybe I will draw attention to them after we can take a little bit of time. A lot of us here in Minnesota who knew her personally were pretty wiped out yesterday. It was a weird day, weird energy yesterday. She was fierce, yet she was so kind and gracious. She just had the perfect balance for what she was doing. I know she lived her life the way she wanted to. And I know she would have never wanted us to back down. And we didn't. We showed up for you, Melissa. All right. Let's take a break and come back. You're listening to A Satellite View. We'll be right back. Back on A Satellite View. Thank you for indulging my breaking down. Thank you for listening this far, if you're still listening. Me trying to get through my stories about my friend, Melissa Hortman, who was also a lawmaker and a Democratic politician. I just really wanted to talk to you about her as a human being. because we need to remember we're human beings. It's going to be very difficult for me to admit that the person that did this to her and her husband is a human being. If he's a mentally messed up human being who's hurting himself, well, he was triggered by Donald Trump. Melissa's blood is on Donald Trump's hands and Elon Musk's hands. This rhetoric needs to stop, this hateful rhetoric. It's very maddening. So the bots and everybody who came out and tried to blame this as the shooter being some deranged left-wing lunatic, as really? You think we're going to believe that for one moment? This is on Donald Trump, who, by the way, has not said a word about this. He put out a statement. No, he didn't. Somebody else wrote that statement. He doesn't write like that. He doesn't talk like that. He's unable to think like that. So Donald Trump has not said a word about this because I was going to say Donald Trump is not a human being. But I got to go along with my own principles and recognize that everybody is a human being. I don't know what the hell's going on with him and the darkness that is powering him and other people. Now, I do want to say one thing that I think is really important in this story that's kind of astonishing as well, that I think is very underreported. You may not have heard. The first victims were State Senator John Hortman and his wife. I've met John Hortman, but I didn't really know him. But because this is kind of out here in our area, western suburbs, there's a town called Champlin, and a Champlin police officer who was called to the John Hortman house, and they saw there was a shooting there, just intuitively said, hey, we should go check on Melissa Hortman's house because this guy is a senator. She is a very well-known, fellow Democratic, legislator, lawmaker here in Minnesota. So they went to her house, and that's how they caught the guy. He was coming out of their house, getting back into his fake police car, and they caught him. He fired back at the police. Then he ran back in the house and ran out the back door, and he disappeared, and everybody's been looking for him ever since. Sadly, it sounds like they got there just seconds too late. But he had a list of 70 targets. He had a list of a lot of Democratic politicians. Of course, you've heard that Tim Walz was on there, Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison. I'm sure some other of people who I consider pretty close friends of mine, like Kelly Morrison, who's also doesn't live that far from that area. I imagine she was on that list. And I can't tell you how horrifying it is to even be as close to it as I am. But to be one of these people, it's absolutely horrifying. Anyway, I've already spent enough time on the one topic, which turned out to be a distraction that I imagine some of the people in the Donald Trump sphere are glad about because it's taking away from their absolute disaster of his birthday parade. It was obvious that some of the participants, the enlisted people, were not marching in step. They weren't wearing their dress clothes. They were wearing their fatigues. They were showing their disdain for being there. The crowd was kind of basically like it would be. I've been on the mall in Washington, D.C. a few times, and it looked like that's how many people there always are, just on a Wednesday in the middle of the summer. If anything, it deterred people from going to Washington, D.C. It did not attract people. It was pathetic. I don't know if you've been able to see some of the video because they're not letting it out very much. So you kind of got to dig for it because it was an amazing flop. The video of Donald Trump himself is unbelievable how horrible he looks and how pissed off and sad and tired and wrecked he looks. It's also a distraction from Israel invading Iran and then Iran shooting back. And all of a sudden, this Iron Dome that was bragged about so much was penetrated pretty badly. So what the hell, Netanyahu? He has further endangered Jewish people. Jewish people are in a worse spot because of his maneuvering on this. There was supposed to be a vote, non-confidence vote. His government was apparently going to be shifting. And what does he do? He starts another war. He's just trying to stay out of prison. He is the Israeli Trump. And when he loses power, he will go to prison. He's already been convicted, just like Trump. And if they're saying that, Iran was about to get a nuclear bomb or multiple nuclear bombs, that's because of Trump and Netanyahu getting rid of Obama's deal he had with Iran to not make nuclear bombs. That's maddening. The fact that Trump is completely AWOL from being president of the United States is maddening. He's again, it's almost as bad as it was 2 weeks ago when he completely disappeared for 4 days. He kind of showed up at this parade and did not look like he was in very good shape. The Gavin Newsom news, Gavin Newsom saying that, yes, there was a phone call, not the day Trump said it was. It was a completely different phone call. No, we did not talk about Los Angeles. I wanted to talk about the problems that were starting in Los Angeles at that time, but he didn't. And he said, I don't even want to tell you what he was talking about on this phone conversation because I still have some respect for the office of the president. And I am so embarrassed by this guy and what our phone conversation was like. It was just crazy. He is not there anymore. He is a completely different person than the person I dealt with even 4 years ago. That's Gavin Newsom making a big, and Donald Trump, you can tell, he doesn't fight back when he knows he can't. Here I want to play you something that Eric Swalwell said about Elon Musk.
And what I say to the Epstein allegation that he made is Donald Trump is the most litigious person who's ever walked this earth. If Elon Musk tweeted at me and said that I was in the Epstein files, he would have a lawsuit on his desk within an hour. The fact that Donald Trump, the most litigious person in the world, has not yet sued Elon Musk for defamation is very, very telling and very alarming, and a signal to Democrats that we need to understand at the Department of Justice what exactly has Donald Trump ordered them to conceal from the American people.
Eric Swalwell is making a very good point there. Why has Donald Trump not come out against Elon Musk and say he was lying about me and the Epstein files? And why has he not sued him for libel? Why did he not? The other things, too, about Elon Musk saying Donald Trump would have lost the 2024 presidential election had it not been for me. And now the story about that I talked about last weekend and the weekend, I've been talking about this for a long time, but the Rockland County, New York, where there was one district where the Democratic senator got 79% of the vote and Kamala Harris got 0 votes. Oops, went a little too far, Elon. Took that particular voting machine maybe a little too far. Evidence of the exact same thing in all 7 of the swing states. You don't win all the swing states, have the blue wall fall, have 88 counties flipping red, none flipping blue when Donald Trump barely won. That never happens. Those things never happen, yet they happened in 2024. Did they? Okay. Anyway, that story about Rockland, New York is being picked up by Newsweek, the AP, and other places. It is being talked about more and more. The question is being asked more and more, and comments on Twitter and Blue Sky and are getting more and more like, I knew he didn't win. I knew there was something weird about this. Of course it was rigged. Of course he didn't win. That's happening more and more. So Donald Trump and his side needs as many distractions as possible, not to mention the budget, the big, beautiful bill they're trying to pass that's going to take away Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and other essential things. And they don't want us to hear about it. Now, of course, we know Elon tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube, which is not going to work. It's too late, Elon. You have already said that you rigged the election for Donald Trump and that Donald Trump is all over the Epstein files, and Donald Trump did not retaliate. That will never change. His completely failed and embarrassing parade he tried to do for his birthday, you can't put that back in the tube. That's out there forever. And the fact that they're saying 5 million, but they were saying that before the protests were going to happen. It's going to be. Everybody, most people that are good at this and are really following this say it's going to be between 10 and 12 million people showing up across the country. 1 million alone in Boston showed up. Tens of thousands in other places. Red zones. My friend Doug and his wife went to this small town that I have visited him, and he took me here. We went clamming near this small fishing town on Cape Cod. It's very red zone. He's always thought of it as being very Republican and very Trumpy since Trump became the main Republican. And he said, we were going to go. We made our signs. It was raining and chilly. We went. I thought there was going to be 15 people. They got caught in a car jam, a traffic jam. Took them 25 minutes to drive 3 miles to get there. When they got there, he said, there's got to be at least 3,000 people here. And he sent me a selfie video of him with the crowd in the background. And it was bringing him to tears. He was so elated and happy about the turnout in this small town. And he said, these people that if I would have looked at, I would say, oh, that's definitely a Trumper. These older fishermen with, he said, rough hands, these really rugged guys were there with anti-Trump signs. The energy of this weekend has been both good and bad. Again, my friend Melissa Hortman, the role that she ended up playing in this whole thing, putting a spotlight on some things, but giving the ultimate sacrifice because she was a good person, because she was trying to help other people. That's what her life mission was. Mixed with the elation that my friend Doug was feeling and so many other people were feeling. The extra turnout, the added turnout in Minnesota because of what happened to Speaker Hortman and her husband, and John Hoffman and his wife, by the way, too. And I'm so proud. I'm so proud. And this is unbelievable. The amount of turnout. I'm sure you've seen video. I'm sure you've been hearing about it. And if you haven't, go find it. Go on Midas Touch. Ben Meiselas did a great synopsis of this, showing video of unbelievable I said to Eve this morning, my daughter, I said, I feel like I didn't know there were this many people in the world that I'm seeing in these videos. Yet they're all there gathered. Each crowd is just unbelievable. That's what we got to keep at. We got to keep at it. I didn't even cover what's going on in Los Angeles. That all happened. Everything Kamala Harris told us was going to happen if Donald Trump became president has happened. But we know the truth about that. We know she won the election. We're getting closer and closer to having everyone realize that truth. It is happening. Kind of quickly. I wrote a text to Congressperson Kelly Morrison, my congressperson. I've talked about her a little bit earlier in this show. She's also a really good friend of mine. And she was a really great friend of Melissa Hortman. And I wrote to her yesterday and, went through a couple of her and my mutual memories of Melissa. It took a long time for her to text back, and I wasn't expecting her to text back. I'm sure she had an even harder day than I did. And at the end of it, though, I said, I know you will be safe. A lot because her security was ramped up a lot. Again, all the extra money and diversion of resources that we got to do because of these idiot fucking hate mongers. At the end, I wrote to her I was trying to see, I don't know how to, you don't know what to say. You don't know where people are at. I just said, we will get through this. And then she wrote me back and said a couple things and then said, we will get through this with even more determination. That's how we got to treat Melissa's sacrifice, ultimate sacrifice. What happened to her needs to motivate us even harder, give us even more determination. Let's do what Kelly said. Let's get through this with even more determination. We're all in this together. I'm in this with you, and thank you for being here listening to this show with me. I think that's it. I mean, it feels weird because there were so many things that happened. I can't cover it in the show, and you've heard about a lot of it. I hope this gives you a perspective that helps. And either way, I just thank you so much for being here. Let's stick together and keep each other sane. Remember to take care of yourself. You can't take care of anyone else unless you take care of yourself. I know Melissa wants us to do that. I know Melissa wants us to get through this with even more determination. Let's honor her by doing that. Let's stick together, take care of ourselves, live our lives that she can no longer do. She doesn't have that privilege anymore. Let's honor her by living our lives as full as we can. And we will get through this. We're coming closer and closer to setting things back to right. We're getting closer and closer. Can you feel that? I can. So, all right. Thank you so much for sticking with me on A Satellite View. I will speak at you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mickelson. Go to toddmickelson.com for links and more information.